We can't even have a women's conference. I'm so annoyed. I am at the Grace Hopper event, which is the largest gathering of women non-binary technologists in the world. When you filled out the form, you had to list that you were a woman or non-binary to attend. During the opening ceremony, the chief diversity officer, who was not scheduled to speak, got on the stage to advise us that spots for women were taken by men who marked themselves as women. Non-binary who then used pronouns he/him to officially register. He advised us that these cisgender men took the spots of women and non-binary people who had tried to register. There are more men here than there are supposed to be. One guy had his mother come and try to register with us. They are taking opportunities that were set aside for us, including the on-site interviews and meeting with top professionals and companies around the world. The chief diversity officer announced that they stole those spots unfairly. Great for him to speak up, but it's bullshit that this happened. Cisgender men do not need more opportunities in tech. They are the majority. We need those spots. Underserved people and communities need those spots. Edit: I didn't want this to become a non-binary, trans, or post against people who truly were invited to this event. It is about the large number of, statistically speaking, most likely cis men taking spots of underrepresented women in technology, our trans sisters, and the truly non-binary. I got a lot of this while running queer sapphic events. I'll be non-binary for the night, heh. I'm a lesbian. I love women, heh. Like, holy fuck guys, read the room, we don't want you here. It's not a Sphinx riddle you need to decode. We just aren't able to say no cishet men wanted because they'll get violent, litigious, retaliatory. Why weren't those men named, shamed and then told to leave? The event was clearly not for them. They shouldn't have been allowed to get away with that bullshit. I went to GHC a few years ago and it was an absolute shit show. I have heard from people who attended in more recent years that it's continued to be this way. I don't know what is going on, but they are not able to run a good conference. It's a shame, because back in the early 2000s it was the place for women in tech and was a coveted conference at every company I worked at. I would band together with the other women and agree not to engage with any of the dudes there. Did they not make them leave? Dude here. First, I am so sorry that guys feel so entitled to do this. It's stupid and accomplishes nothing other than painting the guys as stupid as they are. Second, the fact that I've had to tell multiple guys to not pull this, including going to a lesbian speed dating event, is fucking dumb, and is always reasoned as well. There's going to be all sorts of women there and only a few guys. Think of all the women I can sleep with, hit on. Like, dude, THEYRE not that into you. Again, I am so sorry that a lot of guys are this fucking stupid. Any of those guys would be immediately blacklisted for any potential opportunities in my book. Absolutely shameful. They are taking opportunities that were set aside for us, including the on-site interviews and meeting with top professionals and companies around the world. If they got there by lying on their entrance forms, they either should have been removed from the premises once they arrived, or the company reps should have refused to speak with them. That is an inherent problem with self-reported identities. It is basically an honor thing. The only thing that could possibly mitigate abuse is a more or less permanent record of the self-identification. For example, in a government ID. Though if the government is several levels of shitty like with the US currently, that is of course not a viable idea. The more accepted and normalized trans and non-gendered identities become, the less of a problem this kind of abuse will become. 2. Because right now the abuse is still high because people do not deem it a real breach of honor to defy the silly, new, made-up identity system. I'm confused. How can these guys be stealing on-site interview slots set aside for women unless the interviewing companies are going along with it? I mean, I know assorted people who are non-binary and present as mostly male. But if these companies are following through with the deceptively acquired interviews, then there should be repercussions on them. I am here as well and was so upset. I am really glad that the chief diversity officer did say something. But the fact that he had to is really sad. This is the one thing that we have to come together and build each other up. What bothers me the most is the men were not even going to all of the sessions. I did not see one man in any session that I went to. They were just going to the interviews and career fair. So they are really not allies. I am a hiring manager. Met around 60-70 men per day. Met only 2 non-binary people for the first 3 days. One guy cut the line, pushed a woman, and interrupted a discussion I was having with a female candidate. He then proceeded to describe the amazing software he built, and mansplained the authentication process to me. A senior technical manager, I gave him a technical screening right there and chewed him out. Why were these men even there? So sad to read this. I support female engineering students in my work, and so many of the students I know were so excited to take a break from seeing men rule tech. I was so hopeful it was going to be a better experience for them. Then they can't have a locker room to talk in. Reminds me of the Society of Women Engineers conference. Really messed up, but the people managing should have done better. There are bad elements out there that just have to attack any kind of autonomy. It's so messed up. Isn't the whole thing about being non-binary is that they sometimes look like men and use he/him pronouns? The only way you'd be able to tell there was abuse was if a bunch of dudes were going around bragging that they lied on the form, right? Oof. Is any of this tied back to employers? Dudes doing this with any sort of affiliation to their employers probably wouldn't go over well with HR back at work. BTW. I have seen various levels of this same sort of temper tantrum backlash when women tried to do anything that was focused on women participants. Dudes start screaming about discrimination and what about ing because they are suddenly not the center of attention. It seems to be more common in spaces where women are purposely kept out or kept on the margins. On one hand, maybe. On the other hand, non-binary welcoming spaces being spectacularly shit to non-passing trans women, or just mask-presenting NBs is also a thing. And I know trans women who've had a bad time there. I know a fair number of NBs who prefer he/him pronouns, many of whom even have OEM vaginas. Especially with how expensive GHC is to attend and how fairly pointless it would be for cis men to attend. There's a fair chance a lot of them are neither cis nor men. Why isn't the diversity officer kicking them out? The entitlement. JFC. You know, I have never been a manhatter. But things like this just make it harder to stay neutral about cis males as a whole, and I'm married to one. Deliberately taking the things we try to set aside for ourselves is such a privileged and bullshit thing to do. I mean, none of us are trying to steal their Andrew Tate merch. There ought to be more verification that the person just filling out a form. How do you define truly non-binary? What an excellent way for these men to get their sorry asses blacklisted from hiring by every company sponsoring or recruiting at the event. Just saying, I wouldn't hire these people. Inability to follow simple directions registering for a conference doesn't bode well for their ability to, work an actual job at an actual company.